I didn't ask to be born into this particular family. Hell, I never even requested to be born. However, here I am, Zoe, the unwanted first child of a failed union. Divorce-related resentment taints my earliest memories. I had just outgrown my diapers when my parents divorced. Mom had remarried to a man named Tom by the time I was 3 years old. I suppose Tom wasn't all bad. He was a doting father who lavished gifts and affection onto my mother. However, it was immediately apparent that I was merely extra baggage that was included in the bundle. That is, until I was 5 years old. When Mom became pregnant, everything in the world seemed to center around the adorable baby that was growing inside her. Tom was ecstatic, gushing nonstop about his child as if I didn't exist. I could have easily passed for invisible on the day my sister Emily was born. Tom cooed and made faces I'd never seen before, holding her like she was made of glass. Mother glowed with pride, as though she was holding her firstborn. Zoe, my mother continued, acknowledging my existence at last. Come meet your baby sister. You'll be of great assistance to her. Looking through the bundle of blankets, I saw a red, wrinkled face that resembled a potato rather than a newborn. I muttered, hi, not experiencing the immediate connection that everyone seemed to be expecting. That was the last day of my childhood. I was Emily's big sister, her little helper, her built-in babysitter. I was no longer just Zoe. Zoe, watch your sister while I make dinner. Zoe, can you change Emily's diaper? Zoe, why don't you read Emily a bedtime story? It never came to an end. The same thing would always come up when I tried to slink away to play with my friends or just spend some alone time. Zoe, where are you? Emily requires your help. That little, whiny thing that had taken my position in the family made me grow to hate it. But every time I even hinted at being frustrated, I was treated with disillusionment and lectures. Mom used to say, "You're a big girl now," Zoe, in a firm voice. Now is the moment to behave accordingly. You must serve as a positive role model for Emily. Tom would answer, yeah. Having a young sister like that is truly a blessing. Some young people would kill to have the chance. And so started the cycle that would come to characterize my childhood, constantly prioritizing Emily over my own needs and desires. I was Zoe, the caregiver, the assistant, and the girl who was unseen. The division in our family deepened as Emily grew older. It was obvious to me, too, who was the favorite child by the time she was 7 and I was 12. One day, Mom said, Zoe, Emily needs your room for her art and music. You'll be moving into her old room this weekend. I looked at her, astonished. That's my room, though. Since I was young, I have had it. Tom intervened with a condescending tone. So you're old enough to comprehend now. More room is needed for Emily's activities. Her easel and synthesizer are quite large. What about my things? I made a feeble protest. Where will I put my books? Mom cut in, you'll make it work. Emily's abilities require development. Don't you want to stand by your sister? Once more, there it was, the guilt trip. The idea that I would give up all for Emily and not moan. Biting my tongue, I nodded while holding back the tears. My already shaky sense of belonging took yet another hit after the relocation. Naturally, Emily was overjoyed, smiling at me as I stuffed my items into the tiny space that used to be hers. She pranced around her new large room. Emily's preferential treatment only became more obvious as we grew older. She made the most of her ability to get away with anything because she knew she could. I saw her slyly taking cash out of Tom's wallet one day. Emily, I growled. What are you doing? All she did was smile and put a finger to her lips. Don't be such a tattletale, Zoe. When Tom found the missing money later that night, chaos ensued. $20. He yelled. Who took $20 from my wallet? Emily's eyes widening in dread. I was about to say something when she blurted out, I saw Zoe near your room earlier. Everybody looked at me. I didn't. I trailed off, but Emily interrupted. She said, check her backpack, in a tone that was laced with fox worry. Tom stormed over and ripped open my school bag, much to my horror. There was a $5 cash stuffed into a side pocket. Zoe, Mom let out a gasp. How could you? I didn't take it. When I realized what Emily had done too late, I sobbed. I swear it wasn't me. But my objections were ignored. I had to complete extra tasks, was suspended for a month, and had constant lectures about responsibility and trust. While all was going on, Emily was grinning smugly and enjoying her win. That night, as I lay in my too-small bed in my too-small room, I made a decision. I couldn't keep living like this, always the scapegoat, always the afterthought. I needed to find a way out. High school became my ticket to freedom. While Emily coasted through on charm and our parents' doting attention, I buried myself in books and extracurriculars. Every A on my report card, every academic achievement, was a step closer to independence. The day I received my college acceptance letter was the happiest of my life. Full scholarship, dormitory included. I was getting out. The summer before college, I picked up a job at a local cafe. Every dollar I earned went into a secret savings account. Never again would I be financially dependent on my family. Moving day arrived, and I couldn't pack fast enough. As I lugged my suitcases to the car, Emily lounged in the doorway, smirking. Have fun at loser college, she drawled. Try not to bore everyone to death with your nerdiness. I bit back a retort. In a few hours, I'd be free of her taunts. College was everything I'd hoped for and more. For the first time, I was judged on my own merits, not constantly compared to my sister. I threw myself into my classes, determined to make the most of this opportunity. My human resources management program was challenging but fascinating. I loved learning about organizational behavior, talent acquisition, and conflict resolution. Ironically, my dysfunctional family had given me plenty of real-world experience in those areas. Between classes and studying, I kept my job at a cafe near campus. The work was exhausting, but every paycheck felt like a victory. This was my money, earned by my own efforts. Holidays were awkward. I returned home to find Emily the center of attention as always. She was in high school and apparently excelling in her social life, if not her studies. Zoe, Mom would say, her voice dripping with false cheer. Why don't you tell us about school? Any boys in your life? I'd give them the bare minimum of information, counting the hours until I could return to campus. My real life, my real self, was there now. Graduation day arrived before I knew it. As I stood in my cap and gown, diploma in hand, I felt a surge of pride. I'd done it. Despite everything, I'd succeeded. My family was there, looking slightly out of place among the celebrating crowds. Emily rolled her eyes at the ceremony. God, this is boring, she muttered. Can we go eat now? I ignored her, posing for photos with my roommates and favorite professors. These were the people who had supported me, who had seen my potential. They were my real family now. Fresh out of college, I landed a job as a human resources manager at a large company. As I scrolled through apartment listings, my heart sank. Even the tiniest studios were way out of my budget. So, Mom said during one of our infrequent phone calls, "Why don't you move back home, just until you get on your feet? You won't have to pay rent, just help out around the house a bit." Against my better judgment, I agreed. It was supposed to be temporary, just until I saved enough for my own place. I should have known better. From the moment I moved back in, it was like I'd never left. Emily was still the golden child, now in college, fully paid for by our parents, of course. I, on the other hand, was right back to being Cinderella. "Zoe, can you start dinner?" "We're starving," Mom would call out the moment I walked in from work. "Zoe, the bathroom needs cleaning," Tom would announce, not bothering to lift a finger himself. I'd come home exhausted from a full day at the office, only to face hours of cooking and cleaning. Meanwhile, Emily lounged on the couch, scrolling through her phone and complaining about how hard her life was. I bit my tongue so often, I'm surprised it didn't fall off. This wasn't what I'd agreed to, but every time I tried to protest, they reminded me that I lived there rent-free. Then came the bombshell. Emily, barely into her sophomore year, announced she was getting married. To a guy 10 years older than her, no less. "Isn't it romantic?" she gushed, flashing her enormous diamond ring. "Jason is so successful. He says I don't even need to finish college." I watched in disbelief as our parents fawned over Emily and her fiancé. They threw themselves into wedding planning with gusto, sparing no expense. I couldn't help but wonder if they'd be this generous if it were my wedding. But of course, in their eyes, I was destined to be the spinster daughter, too focused on work to find a man. The wedding was a lavish affair. I stood beside Emily as her bridesmaid, plastering on a fake smile as I watched my parents beam with pride. This was everything they'd ever wanted for their favorite daughter. After a honeymoon in the Maldives, another gift from our parents, Emily and Jason moved into a rented apartment. I thought maybe things would improve at home without Emily's constant presence. I was wrong. A few months later, Emily showed up on our doorstep, glowing with news. "I'm pregnant," she squealed as my parents erupted in joyous celebration. I felt a knot form in my stomach. Somehow, I knew this would end up complicating my life even further. Sure enough, over the next few months, I was roped into helping Emily prepare for the baby. Shopping trips, doctor's appointments, and setting up the nursery, all on top of my job and household chores. When my nephew was born, Emily and Jason were over at our house constantly. More messes for me to clean, more mouths for me to feed. "Isn't it wonderful, Mom?" Emily said, cradling her grandson. "Our family is growing." I looked around at the chaos, toys strewn about, dishes piled in the sink, and my work papers shoved aside to make room for baby gear. This wasn't my family, not really, and this definitely wasn't my life. A year had passed since the birth of Emily's son. I'd settled into a routine, balancing my job with the endless chores at home. It wasn't ideal, but I was making it work. Then came the dinner that would change everything. "So," Mom said, her tone unusually serious, "we need to discuss something. Your sister's moving back home with Jason and the baby. They can't afford their place anymore." I waited for the other shoe to drop. It didn't take long. "We need you to move out," Tom said bluntly. "By the end of the week." The fork clattered from my hand. "What? But where am I supposed to go?" "You're a grown woman with a job," Mom said dismissively. "You'll figure it out." Anger, hot and fierce, tears bubbled up inside me. Why is it always about Emily? I exploded. Why do you always choose her over me? "Don't be selfish, Zoe," Tom snapped. "Your sister has a family to support. You're alone. You can manage on your own." "Selfish?" I repeated, incredulous. "I've done nothing but sacrifice for this family for years." Mom's eyes narrowed. "Well, we won't be needing your sacrifices anymore, or your services as a maid for that matter." In a daze, I packed my belongings. There wasn't much. Most of the furniture belonged to my parents. Tears streamed down my face as I lugged my suitcases to my car, but I refused to let them see me break. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of Emily's car pulling into the driveway. She gave me a little wave, her expression a mix of triumph and happiness. I found a small apartment across town, barely more than a studio. It was all I could afford on such short notice. As I unpacked my meager belongings, a strange sense of peace washed over me. For the first time in my life, I was truly on my own. Days turned into weeks. I threw myself into my work, determined to prove I could make it on my own. To my surprise, I found I was happier than I'd been in years. No one to clean up after, no one to cook for, no one to put before my own. 2 years flew by in a whirlwind of hard work and dedication. My efforts hadn't gone unnoticed. I was promoted to Chief Recruitment Manager, a position that came with a significant pay bump and a lot more responsibility. I moved to a nicer apartment closer to work, filling it with furniture I'd chosen myself. No hand-me-downs, no compromises, just my style, my space. It felt like freedom. I'd finally found some peace away from the constant drama of my family. Then out of the blue, my phone rang. Emily's name flashed on the screen. Zoe, her voice was syrupy sweet. I need a favor. Jason's looking for a new job. I was hoping you could help him out at your company. I sighed, of course. It wasn't a social call after all. I can look into it, I said cautiously, but I can't promise anything. When Jason's resume landed in my inbox, I did my due diligence. I found a few entry-level positions that matched his qualifications and passed them along. These are beneath me, Jason scoffed when I called to discuss the options. Don't you have anything better? I bit back a retort. These are the positions available that match your experience. Take it or leave it. He left it. A few weeks later, I heard through the office vine that Jason had landed a cushy job at our biggest competitor as head of sales. No less. I nearly choked on my coffee when I heard. How the hell did that happen? I muttered to myself. It didn't take long to find out. Mom let it slip during one of our infrequent phone calls. "Oh, your father pulled some strings," she said casually. "He knows someone on their board of directors. Isn't it wonderful? Jason's doing so well." Well, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. All those years of hard work, of proving myself, and my parents had never once offered to help me. But for Jason, they'd move mountains. I wanted to scream, to confront them about the unfairness of it all. But what would be the point? They'd never see it my way. So I swallowed my anger and said nothing. A month passed. I threw myself into my work, trying to forget about Jason and my family's blatant favoritism. Then came the call that would change everything. So, Jason's voice was low, conspiratorial. "I need your help with something." "What is it?" I asked, wary. "I need some information, customer lists, pricing details. You know, the good stuff." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Are you asking me to steal confidential information?" "Come on, it's not stealing," he cajoled. "Just sharing between family." "That's corporate espionage, Jason. It's illegal." He laughed. "As if I told a particularly funny joke. No one will know it came from you. I'll make it worth your while. We'll split the commission." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Absolutely not. Don't ever ask me something like this again." "Don't be so uptight," he pressed. "Think about Emily, about your nephew. Don't you want to help your family?" That was the last straw. "If you ever contact me about this again, I'm going straight to the police," I snapped. "And don't you dare use my sister or nephew to manipulate me." I hung up, my hands shaking with rage. How dare he? But I had a sickening feeling that this was far from over. A week after Jason's disturbing phone call, I was buried in paperwork when my assistant buzzed me. "Miss Carter, your sister and her husband are here to see you." I froze, a chill running down my spine. This wasn't a coincidence. "Send them in," I said, my mind racing. Emily bounced in, all smiles and chatter, with Jason following close behind. Surprise! We were in the neighborhood and thought we'd drop by. As they settled into the chairs across from my desk, I silently texted our head of security. "Keep an eye on Jason. My brother-in-law, suspicious activity possible." "So how have you been?" Emily gushed, launching into a monologue about her son's latest achievements. I nodded along, half listening, my attention focused on Jason. He was fidgety, his eyes darting around my office. Suddenly, he stood up. "Sorry, where's your restroom?" "Down the hall to the left," I said, watching him hurry out. The moment the door closed, Emily leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Oh my gosh, Zoe, you'll never believe what happened at the grocery store yesterday." So I was in line, right, and this lady in front of me had like 1,000,000 coupons. As Emily prattled on about her mundane grocery store adventure, my suspicion grew. She was trying too hard to keep my attention. Her story was unnecessarily detailed and animated. My hand inched toward the silent alarm button under my desk. And then the cashier called the manager, and you won't believe what he said. Emily continued, her eyes darting to the door and back to me. I pressed the alarm. Within seconds, I heard commotion in the hallway. Emily's eyes widened. "What's going on?" We rushed out of my office to find chaos. Security guards were wrestling Jason to the ground outside the sales director's office. Scattered papers littered the floor around them. "Let go of me," Jason yelled, struggling against the guards. "This is a misunderstanding," Emily screamed, rushing toward her husband. "What are you doing? Let him go." I stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. The police arrived minutes later, taking statements from everyone involved. I told them everything. Jason's phone call, his request for confidential information, my suspicions about today's visit. The next morning, I was called into the director's office. My palms were sweaty as I knocked on the door, unsure of what to expect. "Zoe," the director said, gesturing for me to sit. "I want to commend you for your actions yesterday. Your quick thinking and integrity prevented a potentially disastrous breach of our company's security." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Thank you, sir. I was just doing my job." He nodded approvingly. "That's the kind of dedication we value here. In fact, I think it's time we discuss your future with the company." As I left his office an hour later, my head was spinning. A promotion, a raise, and a commendation in my file. It was everything I'd worked for, everything I'd dreamed of. But as I sat at my desk, staring at the family photo I still kept despite everything, I couldn't help but wonder, at what cost did this success come, and what would happen next with my family? The morning after the incident, my phone rang incessantly. I knew who it was before I even looked at the screen. With a deep breath, I answered, "Zoe." Mom's voice was shrill. "What have you done?" Before I could respond, Tom's voice bombed through the speaker. "You need to fix this, Zoe. Now." For the next hour, they berated me, demanding I recant my testimony and take the blame for Jason's actions. "Think about your sister," Mom pleaded. "Think about your nephew. You're going to ruin their lives." "And what about you?" Tom chimed in. "You're all alone, no husband, no kids. It will be easier for you to bear all this trouble than for Jason." I felt a familiar pressure building in my chest, the weight of their expectations threatening to crush me. But this time, something was different. I was different. "No," I said, my voice steady. "I won't do it. Jason broke the law. He has to face the consequences." There was a moment of stunned silence before the tirade began anew. "You ungrateful child," Mom screeched. "After everything we've done for you." "That's it," Tom growled. "You're no daughter of ours. Don't expect a penny when we're gone." The line went dead. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling oddly light. It was over, finally, truly over. The next few months were a whirlwind. Jason was charged with trespassing, attempted burglary, and industrial espionage. He lost his job, his reputation in tatters. Emily miraculously escaped charges. I threw myself into my work, determined to prove my parents wrong. I didn't need their support or their money. I had myself, and that was enough. Mutual connections began to spread the word that Jason had been released from prison, but had taken to drinking because he was unemployed. Emily started a string of misadventures after losing hope in her fallen prince. The tipping point was reached when Jason discovered her having sex with someone else, in my parents' home, no less. Following the altercation, Jason was left on the street, and Emily received divorce papers. Emily brought all of her new lovers to my parents' house, where she stayed. They kicked her out the same way they kicked me out not too long after they'd had enough. My parents took on the role of raising their grandson after she lost custody of her son. I waited for the sense of satisfaction and vindication that I had always imagined I would experience when I heard each piece of news. However, it never materialized. Rather, I experienced nothing at all. Their turmoil was not mine, and they were no longer my family. Years went by. My diligence and moral character paid off in ways I could never have predicted as I moved up the business ladder. Then I met him on a Tuesday that was just like any other. Mark was benevolent, encouraging, and a world away from the poisonous environment I had grown up in. Everything I had never known I wanted. A year later, he proposed, and I said yes right away. Just Mark's family and our closest friends attended our tiny private wedding. I knew I had at last found the unwavering acceptance and love I had been looking for as I stood there saying my vows. It's been years since I spoke to Emily or my parents. Though I don't reach out, there are moments when I wonder about them and my nephew. Some bridges are meant to remain burned.